you through what it takes to resolve the bonding pattern and own your disowned subselves, and to realize that every difficulty in the relationship, every sour bonding pattern, is really a challenge and a wonderful opportunity for you to become a broader person and to center yourself from a higher and higher perspective. Okay, that said, we're going to go through with just one of Janet's lovers what it's like for you to go through this with your main lovers too. And you can follow along and perhaps do a little bit in your head while Janet's thinking about what her responses are. But most of all, do go to www.schooloftantra.com and do this in depth. And we're going to just do this with one lover, but you do this in sequence, starting with the earliest. So first you make a list of your main lovers, and if you're helping somebody, you have them make the list, and you write down the names. And then for each name on the list, once you get the list, you start to go through that. And for some people, they'll, in the middle of it, they'll say, "Oh, I forgot about so-and-so. How could I have ever?" Okay, so we're going to start with one person. Which person would you like to start with of your prior important relationships, Janet?
I was going to go with one of my lovers who's dead, but he was further down the line. I think I want to start with the it's like basically the first main relationship I had, and I want to just preface this that I've totally worked through this and I've forgiven this person, and I understand where he's coming from and what happened, and there's a point where you get to when you do this therapy of total forgiveness. But for this exercise, we're going to go through pretty much what I had to go through, because this was probably the most influential and profound relationship.
Well, what name would you like to give the person?
Let's just call this person L.
L.
Yeah, I'm not going to give a full name because I respect this person.
Okay, so how old were you? What years were you involved with L?
Oh, I first met L when I was actually 12 years old. And I met him down at a turnaround station for the trolley. This is back in the 60s. I was 12 in 1966. And I thought he was so cute. It was my first experience of deep and profound love for a person. I guess my sexuality was starting to blossom. I hadn't even had menses yet. Sorry. Menses, my first period, and so, but I just fell instantly madly in love with him. It was a play thing, it was romantic, there were a bunch of other people there, but I noticed this strong and profound attraction, and I basically followed him around for years from afar, just kind of drooling over him. I was his secret admirer.
Okay, so what did you get into emotionally and sexually with each other?
At that point, nothing, but the first sexual inclination was that night. I came home, and I had a dream that I had sex with him, and I married him, and I had never had sex before, and I was 12 years old, wasn't even beginning to think about getting married, but I realized it was down the line sometime in the future, so I had this prophetic dream about marrying this person, and it was our wedding night, and so sexually that night I did get involved with him, but he didn't.
So what were the main events in your relationship?
Well, on July 20th, 1969, Moonwalk Day, the day the humans first walked on the moon, I met him again, and he noticed me at that time, and I broke up with a boyfriend. I ended up having two boyfriends after this initial attraction, and this was the second boyfriend, and I broke up with him because this was 69, so I was very young, and he was more into football and playing games, and I wanted a romance, and he just wasn't available, so I gave him back his friendship ring, and I was crying. I was sitting on this wall, and I was crying, and the moon was very full, and I was thinking, well, I got to get home. I want to watch the moon walk, and I don't want to be going home and crying with my parents and everybody that's going to be in the living room watching this moon walk. So, but he came walking by, and he was heading home, and he goes, hey. So he came over and he talked to me, and we he kissed me. It was like, oh my God, this is the guy I've been, drooling over since I was 12, and he kissed me. So we just talked for a brief while, but it was very sweet and romantic, and I was into science fiction, and he looked up at the moon. He goes, I wonder if there's life out there. Well, what's going on? So it really touched me on a deep core level, because I've always been wanting to explore life on other planets and extraterrestrials, and here he was meeting me that way. So he kissed me, he had to go, and we both wanted to get home because the moonwalk was scheduled. I guess they scheduled it for 9 p.m. or something. It was like a scheduled thing. They're going to go walk on the moon. So I ran home, and as I got in the door, they were coming down the ladder. And they, of course, the famous statement, this is one small step for humanity. For man, one giant leap for mankind. And so as soon as that was over, I took my sister aside and I said, I just met the man I'm going to marry.
Oh, far out.
So it started out fairy tale romance, And so there was a lot of good things. And then we basically dated. I was 15. We dated that whole summer, and it was 1969. It was the summer after the summer of love, so it was still pretty romantic. And so it started out good. But where do we go?
Well, we want to know, because this is a preparation for Tantra, is did you ever get into sex, and what specifically did you and Elle do?
Well, we ended up getting into sex. I was sleeping out. We used to sleep out in the summer, of course. It was always fun to sleep out. And so we were doing sleep outs on each other's porches. And it'd be all girls, right? So I was sleeping out on my one friend. I can name her name, Bootsy. She's now deceased. I was sleeping out on her porch with a couple other girlfriends. And he came up, and he snuck in my sleeping bag, and we had intercourse. And he was a virgin, and I had some experience, not full intercourse, but some kind of I can't remember the details, pleasuring and attempting to have full intercourse with my other two boyfriends. So anyway, we had intercourse, and then it was just very wonderful. So we started making love on a regular basis after that, meeting and making love, because we were just really excited about each other.
So I'm just to look at how this works in Tantra. Who was the initiator? What did you do when you were having intercourse, and what was that like?
Well, I think it was mutual. I don't feel that there was any kind of pressure. It was something I had wanted, I had fantasized about. So it's really hard to ascertain who was the initiator. I think it was mutual. I think he asked permission, which was important, and it wasn't a date rape or anything. That was wonderful. Okay.
Well, one of the most important questions is, when you think about your relationship with Elle, what developmental tasks did you complete? What growth experiences did you go through with Elle?
Well, it gets complicated, because after this initial experience, we ended up a year later getting married. I was only 16. I got married a couple months before my 17th birthday, and then things went sour. And it had been pretty much fun, but the night before we got married, he hit me.
Where did he hit you?
He slapped me across the face. We had some kind of fight, and he smacked me, and I said, "Now I can't marry you. I can't be your girlfriend. I can't be involved with you. You hit me." And he started crying and begging me. And he said, "I'll never do it again." And I promise. And of course, I yielded. And so we went, and we went to the courthouse in downtown Pittsburgh and got married. But the abuse got worse and worse over time, especially when his best friend returned from Vietnam and got involved with a woman that his best friend got involved with this woman that he didn't respect at all, and he would beat this woman, punch her with his fists, And Al saw that, and he thought that was okay in some way. And he started being very chauvinistic towards me, treating me more like chattel, like property, and that he was very dictatorial and bossing. And I think that this other guy, let's call him B, was coaching Al in how to have a relationship. And he was older than Al, and Al looked up to him, and so that was the end of my happy relationship. And then it was just me holding on to it for years. I stayed in that relationship for 12 years.
Wow.
And it got worse and worse. Al started getting guns, and then he at some point would hold his gun against my head and threaten to shoot me. And one day I ran out the back door, and we got into a fight, and he shot at me.
Wow.
And I escaped, and I thought for a while that I had been hit in the back, but and I ran outside, and I was in these pajamas, and it was raining, so you could see right through me. I was quite embarrassed. I was outside.
Where'd you run to?
I lived in a neighborhood much like Queens, New York. We had streets that were paved, and then in between the streets were alleyways, and they weren't paved. They were gravel. And there could be all kinds of stuff in there, because that's where the trash people came down the alleys. And so I ran from the street to an alleyway a couple streets over, and I looked down, and my feet were all bloody, because I had been running on stones, and I was in such a state of absolute terror that I ran on stones and glass, and my feet were all shredded. And it was cold, and it was like November, and it was raining, and it was just, I was freezing. So I didn't know what to do, so I went back. Once again, I went back. And that's when I kind of lost a piece of my soul, where I should have kept going the other way, half naked or not, to my mother or to the police. But I thought about him and the embarrassment, and there was some compassion that maybe there's some way I could work it out. And I was very devoted and stubborn, so I went back.
Wow. So I'd like you, Janet, to imagine that Al is right in front of you. And I'd like you to, from your heart, tell Al what you really wanted with him, what you wished you could have shared with him.
Well, I wish I could have communicated with you clearly and made it work. I had this fairy tale image of marrying monogamously forever and growing old together. And it became, even me, with how stubborn I am, it became quite apparent that you weren't going to do any kind of work on this anger that you had. And as the years went by, you got more and more angry. And I understood your anger because your father had beat you, so there was an understanding of how the abuse started. And I know you told me these long stories of how abusive this man who raised you was, and how it affected you when he died, and you were just a teenager. So I understood all these things, and I didn't have the skills to do anything about it, which I've since learned. I've become a counselor. And yet there was a part of me that was hoping, that ever-present hope, that you could just somehow rise above it and be this enlightened human being that would reach me, who was showering you with love and empathy, and never yelling back, always being compassionate, always being understanding, always reaching towards conversation the best I could. But that didn't happen. So then it was very sad when 12 years later I made a decision to leave.
So I'd like you to tell Al anything I didn't get a chance to tell you, and what my resentments are, and what I really wanted from you. What else do you want to say to Al?
Well, Al, I didn't even get a chance to tell you any of these things that I just shared here on the radio, and maybe you're listening out there. It's a modern world. And if you are listening, I hope that you can forgive me, and I certainly have forgiven you. So what was the other thing you wanted me to do?
What appreciations do you have for Al?
Well, I appreciate that, you were my first romance, and I appreciate the kindness and love and affection that you gave me, and I do appreciate the times that we were able to discuss things that were important to both of us. And I appreciate that you shared life with me, and we had a home together, No, that was the resentments. I can see your paper.